33. And this verse says, therefore, a person who is very eager to maintain his family and kinsmen simply by black methods certainly goes to the darkest region of hell, which is known as Anda Tamishra, purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. 3 words in this verse are very significant. Kevalena means only by black methods. Adhar Mena means unrighteous or irreligious. And Kutumba Varana means family maintenance. Maintaining one's family is certainly the duty of a household, but one should be eager to earn his livelihood by the prescribed method, as stated in the scriptures. In Bhagavad Gita, it is described that the Lord has divided the social system into 4 classifications of castes or varnas, according to quality and worth. Apart from Bhagavad Gita, in every society, a man is known according to his quality and work. For example, when a man is constructing wooden furniture, he is called a carpenter. And a man who works with an anvil and iron is called a blacksmith. Similarly, a man who is engaged in the medical or engineering fields has a particular duty and designation. All these human activities have been divided by the Supreme Lord into 4 varnas, namely Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. In Bhagavad Gita and in other Vedic literatures, the specific duties of the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra are mentioned. One should work honestly according to his qualification. He should not earn his livelihood unfairly by means for which he is not qualified. If a Brahmana who works as a priest so that he may enlighten his followers with the spiritual way of life is not qualified as a priest, then he is cheating the public. One should not earn by such unfair means. The same is applicable to a Kshatriya or a Vaishya. It is especially mentioned that the means of livelihood of those who are trying to advance in Krishna consciousness must be very fair and uncomplicated. Here it is mentioned that he who earns his livelihood by unfair means, Kevalena, is sent to the darkest hellish region. Otherwise, if one maintains his family by prescribed methods and honest means, there is no objection to one's being a family man. Oh, very nice statement. Otherwise, if one maintains his family by prescribed methods and honest means, there is no objection to one's being a family man. Okay. Text number 34. Having gone through all the miserable, hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest forms of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Just as a prisoner who has undergone troublesome prison life is set free again, the person who has always engaged in impious and mischievous activities is put into hellish conditions. And when he has undergone different hellish lives, namely those of lower animals like cats, dogs, and hogs, by the gradual process of evolution, he again comes back as a human being. Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that even though a person engaged in the practice of the yoga system may not finish perfectly and may fall down for some reason or other, his next life as a human being is guaranteed. It is stated that such a person who has fallen from the path of yoga practice is given a chance in his next life to take birth in a very rich family or in a very pious family. It is interpreted that rich family refers to a big mercantile family because generally people who engage in trades and mercantile business are very rich. One who engaged in the process of self-realization or connecting with the supreme absolute truth, but fell short, is allowed to take birth in such a rich family, or he is allowed to take birth in the family of pious Brahmins. Either way, he is guaranteed to appear in human society in his next birth. It can be concluded that if someone is not willing to enter into hellish life as in Tamishra or under Tamishra, then he must take to the process of Krishna consciousness, which is the first class yoga system. Because even if one is unable to attain complete Krishna consciousness in this life, he is guaranteed at least to take his next birth in a human family. He cannot be sent into a hellish condition. Krishna consciousness is the purest life, and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell to take birth in a family of dogs or hogs. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
So this verse, Canto 3, chapter 30, text 34 says, having gone through all the miserable, hellish conditions, and having passed in a regular order through the lowest forms of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth. Again, very interesting. So this is the last verse of Canto 3, chapter 30. 34. So one takeaway from this verse is the following. One who engaged in the process of self-realization or connected with the supreme absolute truth, but fell short, in other words, didn't actually complete his education or attempts to have a completely spiritual life, but fell short, is allowed to take birth in such a rich family, or he is allowed to take birth in the family of pious Brahmins. Either way, he is guaranteed to appear in human society in his next life. It can be concluded that if someone is not willing to enter the hellish life, as in Tamishra or under Tamishra, then he must take to the process Krishna consciousness, which is the first class yoga system, because even if one is unable to attain complete Krishna consciousness in this life, he is guaranteed at least to take his next birth and in a human family. He cannot be sent into hellish condition. Krishna consciousness is the purest life, and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell to take birth in a family of dogs or hogs. Well, you shouldn't have a dog, and you shouldn't have a hog. Bad company. They're usually considered very low-class birds. But most people consider dog as their best friend. Or hogs, in pigs, they're not their best friend, but they eat them. So, thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Description by Lord Kapila of Adverse Fruitive Activities. Fruitive activities means activities that one engages in order to have the fruits, in other words, the result of that activity for sense gratification. So you definitely don't want to have a life like that, because all you do is develop a lot of bad karma and have to suffer birth after birth. That's why it says here that Krishna consciousness is the purest life, and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell to take birth in a family of dogs or hogs or pigs. So that should be a very clear indication that it's really necessary to have the Krishna conscious life to avoid all kinds of hellish conditions, especially taking our next birth as a dog or a hog. So one time Prabhupada was preaching, and he mentioned something like this, taking your next birth as a dog or a hog. Some man raised his hand and says, "What's wrong with being a dog?" And Prabhupada said, "Okay, if you want to be a dog, I give you the blessing that you can be a dog." The devotees were shocked when Prabhupada said that. That means that the man was going to become a dog in his next life. Yeah, well, if you say something stupid like that, what's wrong with becoming a dog? That means that you're completely ignorant. You don't understand what that means. That means you're actually going to become a dog or a hog, a pig, and suffer unnecessarily due to misusing the human form of birth. The human form of birth is special. It's the only form in which you can make spiritual progress and go back to Godhead. You can't do it as a pig. You can't do it as a dog. But you can do it if you have a human body and if you use your human body correctly in Krishna consciousness. Okay, so now we're going to chapter 31. Lord Kapila's instructions on the movements of the living entities. Text number 1. The personality of God said, under the supervision of the Supreme Lord and according to the result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the last chapter, after suffering different kinds of hellish conditions, a man comes again to the human form of body. The same topic is contained in this chapter in order to give a particular type of human form to a person who has already suffered hellish life. The soul is transferred to the semen of a man who is just suitable to become his father. During sexual intercourse, the soul is transferred through the semen of the father into the mother's womb in order to produce a particular type of body. This process is applicable to all embodied living entities, but it is especially mentioned for the man who was transferred to the Andhata Mishra hell. After suffering there, when he who has had many types of hellish bodies, like those of dogs and hogs, is to come again to the human form, he is given the chance to take his birth in the same type of body from which he degraded himself to hell. In other words, previously he did have a body of a hog or a dog, but now, by his, let's say, better karma, he has the body of a human being. So people are going in a cyclic, let's say, a cyclic way of up and down with different types of bodies. So once you're in a cycle like that, it's very difficult to get out of it. The only way to get out of that cycle of sometimes having a human body, sometimes having the body of a dog, and so forth, is if you meet a bona fide devotee and follow the instructions given by a bona fide devotee. Then you can break that cycle and go back to Godhead. Otherwise, it's impossible. You can't do it just by taking birth and going through the process of birth and death, because that is a cycle that is closed. But you can break that cycle by coming in contact with a genuine devotee and being trained in Krishna consciousness and living a life of Krishna consciousness. That's why it says, during sexual intercourse, the soul is transferred through the semen of the father into the mother's womb in order to produce a particular type of body. This process is applicable to all embodied living entities, but it is especially mentioned for the man who was transferred to the Andhata Mishra hell. After suffering there, when he who has had many types of hellish bodies, like that of dogs and hogs, is to come again to the human form, he is given the chance to take his birth in the same type of body from which he degraded himself to hell. Everything is done by the supervision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you see, there are many different cycles in this world. And the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease is experienced by human beings. And unless they become Krishna conscious, they stay in that cycle, birth after birth, going up and down in the different 8,400,000 species of life. And it's terrible because we have an eternal soul. That means we can also eternally stay in that cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, unless, as in a human form, we take the Krishna consciousness and seriously, then we can break that cycle. Otherwise, it's impossible to get out of the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. That's why it says here, everything is done by the supervision of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material nature supplies the body, but it does so under the direction of the Supreme, of the Super Soul. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that a living entity is wandering in this material world on a chariot made by material nature. The Supreme Lord, as Super Soul, is always present within the individual soul. He directs material nature to supply a particular type of body to the individual soul, according to the results of his work, and the material nature supplies it. Here, one word, Reta Kanashraya, is very significant because it indicates that it is not the semen of a man that creates life within the womb of a woman. Very important statement. Rather, the living entity, the soul, takes shelter in a particle of semen and is then pushed into the womb of a woman. Well, that means that Krishna puts the particle of living entity into the semen of the father, and then you take birth. It's not the fact that the father and mother are engaged in sex. It's because of Krishna putting that particular soul in the semen of the father based on the karma of the living entity. So sometimes people think, oh, you have sex and then you have a baby. No, it's not like that. It's not that the father is in control of that process. It's Krishna is in control of the process of birth and also old age and also disease and also death. So we are not independent in any way. We're always dependent on the mercy of the Lord. So here it says, here one word, Reta Kanashraya, is very significant because it indicates that it is not the semen of the father that creates life within the womb of a woman. Rather, the living entity, the soul, takes shelter in a particle of semen and is then pushed into the womb of a woman. Then the body develops. Well, when it says the living entity, the soul, takes shelter in a particle of semen, that whole process is under the control of Krishna. The human being is not in control of that. And then it's pushed into the womb of a woman. Then the body develops. There's no possibility of creating a living entity without the presence of the soul, simply by sexual intercourse. The materialistic theory that there is no soul and that a child is born simply by material combination of the sperm and ovum is not very feasible. It is unacceptable. Yeah, the whole process takes place because of Krishna, not because of some material practice. This, of course, is not understood by most people. They just think that they are the cause of birth of a child, but that's not true. Okay, text number 2. Canto 3, chapter 31, text number 2. On the first night, the sperm and ovum mix, and on the 5th night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. On the 10th night, it develops into a form like a plume, and after that, it gradually turns into a lump of flesh or an egg, as the case may be. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The body of the soul develops in 4 different ways according to its different sources. One kind of body, that of the trees and plants that sprouts from the earth. The second kind of body grows from perspiration, as with flies, germs, and bugs. The third kind of body develops from eggs. And the fourth develops from an embryo. This verse indicates that after emulsification of the ovum and sperm, the body gradually develops either into a lump of flesh or into an egg, as the case may be. In the case of birds, it develops into an egg. In the case of animals and human beings, it develops into a lump of flesh. Okay, and now we're hearing about our experiences of going through birth and growing into a human body. Text 3. In the course of a month, a head is formed, and at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and upper limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body, hair, bones, and skin appear, as do the organ of generation and the other apertures in the body, namely the eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the 7 essential ingredients of the body, namely child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, come into existence. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst make themselves felt. And at the end of 6 months, the fetus, enclosed by the amnion, begins to move on the right side of the abdomen. Yeah, many women experience this. They can feel the movement of the baby in their womb on the and the baby sometimes is kicking on the right side of the woman's womb. When the body when the body of the child is completely formed at the end of 6 months, the child, if he is male, begins to move on the right side, and if female, she tries to move on the left side. Ah, very interesting. You can tell whether you're going to have a boy or a girl by what just read now. During its nutrition from the food and drink taken by the mother, the fetus grows and remains in that abominable residence of stools and urine, which is the breeding place of all kinds of worms. Well, yeah, in the womb of the mother, there are stools and urine, and there are also worms that are biting the body of the fetus. So it's a hellish condition, being in the womb of the mother. In the Markandeya Purana, it is said that in the intestine of the mother, the umbilical cord, which is known as Apyayani, joins the mother to the abdomen of the child. And through this passage, the child within the womb accepts the mother's assimilated foodstuff. In this way, the child is fed by the mother's intestine within the womb and grows from day to day. The statement of the Markandeya Purana about the child's situation within the womb is exactly corroborated by modern medical science, and thus the authority of the Puranas cannot be disputed. as is sometimes attempted by the Mayavadi philosophers. Since the child depends completely on the assimilated foodstuff of the mother during pregnancy, there are restrictions on the food taken by the mother. Too much salt, chili, onion, and similar foods is forbidden for the pregnant mother because the child's body is too delicate and new for him to tolerate such pungent food. Restrictions and precautions to be taken by the pregnant mother, as enunciated in the Smriti scriptures of the Vedic literature, are very useful. We can understand from the Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. The Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it is very scientific. Other processes recommended in the Vedic literature during pregnancy are also very important. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the parents, because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population to maintain the peace and prosperity of the society, country, and human race. Well, and that's why in Krishna consciousness, it is highly recommended that the mother continue to engage in devotional service, avoid eating highly, any foods in the mode of ignorance and passion, and also to not engage in any activities that will be detrimental to the baby in the womb. Now, it says here, since the child depends completely on the assimilated foodstuff of the mother during pregnancy, there are restrictions on the food taken by the mother. Too much salt, chili, onions, and similar food is forbidden for the pregnant mother because the child's body is too delicate and new for him to tolerate such pungent food. Okay, too much salt, too much chili, too much onion, and other forbidden foods. Meat, fish, eggs, and so forth. Restrictions and precautions to be taken by the pregnant mother is enunciated in the Smriti scriptures of Vedic literature, are very useful. We can understand from the Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. Well, what if you don't read the Vedic literature? Then you remain in ignorance and you do many things that actually hurt the child already in the womb of the mother. The Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it is very scientific. So what is the Garbhodana ceremony? Before wanting to have a child, one should chant at least 64 rounds, mother and father together, and meditate on Krishna and pray to the Lord that they may have a nice child. And that goes on not just one time, but throughout the pregnancy of the mother. There is a regular, let's say, puja performed by brahmanas, but also the mother and father should continue the prayers, the praying that they may have a nice child, and during that time there should not be any sexual intercourse. And the mother has to be very careful about what she eats, and the father has to help her by making sure that she is not in anxiety or fear by keeping her in a condition where she's very peaceful. It's very bad for a mother to be in anxiety and fear while being pregnant because it can affect the consciousness of the child that she's going to have. We can understand from the Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. The Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it's scientific, and it is very scientific. So today, what is called Garbhodana ceremony, that means that before the desire to have, well, before, when you have the desire to have a child, you should, husband and wife should chant at least 64 rounds before they try to have a child. In other words, before they try to have intercourse to have a child. They have to have the purified consciousness because the kind of consciousness they have at the moment of conception will determine the kind of child they'll have. This is all scientific. Nobody follows the science anymore. Well, there are some people, there are devotees who actually read the Shastras like we're reading now. They become cognizant of the importance of having the Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse as compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it is very scientific. Yeah, there's before copulation, the husband and wife go through the ceremony called Garbhodana ceremony to purify their minds, because everything depends on the consciousness of the parents when they have copulation to have a baby. So if their consciousness is in the mode of ignorance or passion, well, the child that's born will be mostly in the mode of either passion or ignorance. And the parents will suffer and the child will suffer unnecessarily because they did not take time to learn how to have a child, how to have a baby. They just engaged in copulation due to lust, and therefore the child is born with this type of, let's say, those type of qualities of being lusty or being very ignorant. So we have to be careful what we do. And the way to be careful is to regularly hear Vedic literature as we're doing now on a daily basis, and at least twice or even 3 times a day to hear Bhagavad Gita, so that we keep very, let's say, serious on the path of Krishna consciousness and not deviate into mundane life. So the Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it is very scientific. Other processes recommended in the Vedic literature during pregnancy are also very important. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the parents, because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population to maintain the peace and prosperity of the society, country, and human race. So there is a way of having good children. And if you follow what's being said here, yeah, the world will be filled with good children who are obedient and who are inclined to be Krishna conscious. And therefore there'll be peace and prosperity. Now, whenever there is severe weather, like there's a lot of thunder and rain, or there's a lot of very severe weather behavior, that means demons are being born. So, but we can see that oftentimes the weather is very inclement. It's not very good. And there's a lot of rain, or there's a lot of snow, or there are earthquakes, especially earthquakes. Whenever there's an earthquake, that means a very big demon is born.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes,
So we are having wildfires in LA right now,
yes,
right? Like really bad weather,
yes,
extreme weather.
yes,
Does that mean some demons are being born somewhere?
yeah. Anytime that there's really bad weather, it means demons are being born. If people follow the regulative principles, then obviously Krishna will arrange things so that the weather is nice and people are peaceful and they are not in anxiety or fear. When you have really bad weather, it becomes fearful. And when there's big fires that people have to run away from their house, and when they come back, they say that their house was burned down. That means that they're actually sinful people. That's why that they're being subjected to such horrible situations. Now, there is the science of how to have a peaceful nature. It's possible by following the regulative principles and not engaging in illicit activities. You can actually, let's say, influence the type of weather that's going to take place where you're living. So if you're in an area where everyone is chanting Hare Krishna and following the regulative principles, they will be, let's say, blessed with good weather. But if you live in a place where most of everyone is engaging in illicit activities, activities meaning illicit sex, gambling, meat eating, intoxication, and so forth, then you can expect that there's going to be very bad weather there. And it's going to make people always in anxiety, not knowing what's going to happen day to day. So in those places where people actually follow the regulative principles and are not committing sins, knowingly or even unknowingly, but mainly knowingly, then you can also expect that in that place there'll be a lot of nice weather. The people have peaceful lives. And there are places in the world where the weather is very nice almost all year round, and the people are very peaceful. They're living regulated lives, and they live longer also. Why? Because they're following regulated principles. Now, they might not be Krishna conscious, but they are Christian or they are Muslim, but they're following the rules and regulations of their religion, and therefore they're influencing, as a community, what's going to happen as far as the weather and the conditions in which they're going to live in. So you can turn any place into Vaikuntha by practicing Krishna consciousness. In other words, any place in the world even though it might be a place where there's a lot of inclement weather and so forth. But if the people in that place all become Krishna conscious, then it can change because Krishna controls the weather. It controls everything. So you can turn a devotee can turn any place into Vaikuntha, to a place where there's no kunta. Kunta means anxiety. Vaikuntha means a place where there's no anxiety. By the presence of genuine devotees who are practicing Krishna consciousness seriously. So, also, when a mother is pregnant, too much salt, chili, onion, and similar foods is forbidden for the pregnant mother because the child's body is too delicate and new for him to tolerate such pungent food. Restrictions and precautions to be taken by the pregnant mother, as enunciated in the Smriti scriptures of Vedic literature, are very useful. See, everything's in the Vedas. How to have a child, what to eat and what not to eat, and so forth. Everything is explained in the Vedas. Restrictions and precautions to be taken by the pregnant mother, as enunciated in the Smriti scriptures of Vedic literature, are very useful. We can understand in the Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. The Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for first persons in the higher grades of society. And it is very scientific. Well, even devotees today can basically do the same thing. In other words, before the when they have a desire to have a baby, they can sit down and the Brahmana performs a ceremony, Garbhodana Samskar, and they chant at least 64 rounds before they attempt to have a child. So it's happening today in places where there are devotees who are serious about having a good child. So if the consciousness of the parents are in a mode of passion or ignorance when they're trying to have a child, that's the type of child they're going to have. But if they have, but if they're practicing Krishna consciousness, especially with the help of a let's say a pundit who performs the Garbhodana ceremony, which means that the parents are chanting Hare Krishna and they're not engaged in any illicit activities, and the mother is in a peaceful place where she's never in anxiety or fear, then the child will grow to be a very good person. But if the mother is always in anxiety and fear, if she's eating abominable things like meat and chilies and things like that, the child is going to grow up and be disturbed and engage in unnecessary types of things that just create havoc in society. So there's the science of having children, good children. And there's a science, and it's explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, how many people read the Srimad Bhagavatam? How many people actually follow what's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam? And there are some, definitely. But most people ignore this. And because of that, whenever there's very severe weather with thunder and lightning, a demon is born. So when you see that type of inclement weather, you know somewhere there's a demon born. And if you read the Shastra, previously, see, there were not a lot of demons. There was Hiranyakashipu, few people like that were born. And when they were born, the weather was really bad. Nowadays, the weather is bad in many places. That means that many demons are being born. So there is a way to control the weather. That is by practicing Krishna consciousness seriously. And the more people that practice Krishna consciousness in a particular place, the more the weather and other conditions of nature become very favorable. And the people that live in these types of places are very happy because there are no, let's say, severe consequences due to very, very bad karma. But in those places where the weather is very severe and there are fires, there are earthquakes, there are diseases, all kinds of problems, that means that the people in those areas are very simple. So it's possible to control the weather. Not that you're in charge, not that you can control it, but you act in certain ways to be blessed with good weather. Yeah.
Maharaj, should we assume that, because nowadays the weather is very bad, more regularly there is hail, all of a sudden extreme drop in temperatures, or flooding or tornadoes, all these things are happening. Because should we assume that previous generations or previous yugas were more conductive for spiritual life? The weather would have been much better, like in Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, Satya Yuga compared to Kali Yuga. Is that how we should understand?
What we should understand is if we develop a society in which everyone is following the consciousness, you can expect that the weather will be very climate also, because it's controlled by Krishna. But if you're living in a place where there's a lot of sense gratification and illicit activities taking place, then you can expect to have very bad weather. That's what we should understand. So, if you're living somewhere where the weather is always bad, if you practice Krishna consciousness there, you can have a certain amount of not control, but expectation that you're not going to be harassed by the weather. Like, for example, sometimes there's a tornado. There's this big, gigantic whirlwind, and it's moving. Right? By the way, tornadoes are living entities. They're like demons, But sometimes the tornado destroys so many houses and kills so many people, but the house of the devotee is not touched. Why is that? Because the houses of the devotee, where they're regularly chanting Hare Krishna and following the regular principles, is avoided. Why? Well, the tornado is a person, actually. It's not just something that's in nature. And that's why they say, they put names to tornadoes. They say it's Irene or so. Well, they are living entities.
And also they track, Maharaj.
What?
They track actually in some equipment. They track. Oh, he's going there. He's coming there.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's some predictability.
Some predictability. Yeah.
So we have to understand these things, that we can actually have influence on the weather if not only one person, but a society of people have given up, as it says, gambling, eating, and intoxication. Uh, they all live in a place where it's much more peaceful, and they don't have these severe types of weather. That's because they're following some principles of Krishna consciousness in that place. Yes.
Maharaj, what if like multiple people are born at the same time during the inclement weather? Are
That
all of
means
them?
there's a lot of demons being born. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So modern science talks about this extreme weather as global warming.
The whole thing about global warming is nonsense. Anyway, what is your question?
So my question is like modern science calls it as global warming, but as a devotee, we should understand it's because of the lack of following of regulative principles.
Of course.
That is why we have extreme weather. It is not some random global warming phenomenon.
And it's not something they can control.
They can control.
I found some verses from Bhagavatam that talk about this weather and the demons.
Good.
So in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:1-14, so this verse describes the ominous signs that appeared before the birth of Kamsa's demoniac allies, as well as the atmosphere of terror caused by his rule. Disturbances in different parts of the world in the celestial system occurred. There were excessive rains, thunder, lightning, and harsh winds, making the earth and sky seem extremely fearful. Then Bhagavatam 10:4-5. This verse highlights bad omens at the time of Putana's arrival.
What?
Putana.
Putin, yes.
Yeah. When Putana, the great demoness, entered Demoness and entered Gokula, there were various bad omens seen in the land, in the sky, and the bodies of living creatures, indicating the presence of an inauspicious personality. And then Srimad Bhagavatam 3:17-4, when the demon Hiranyaksha caused imbalance in the universe, the weather and the natural order were severely affected. There were constant meteors, thunderbolts, earthquakes, and the earth was trembling, and there were unnatural eclipses of sun and moon. Fierce winds carried pebbles across the land, creating darkness, and the oceans roared turbulently, flooding various areas. So these are some of the
So you see, there are many demons being born nowadays in different parts of the world where there's very bad weather. That's heralding the birth of a demon.
Yeah. And there are also verses that describe when there is a good ruler or the proper culture. This is the first canto, 10th chapter, 4th verse. Here in this verse sets the context of the kingdom of Maharaj Yudhishthira and the virtuous rule led by him to harmonious weather, bountiful harvest and natural prosperity. During the reign of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the clouds showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all necessities of a man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cows used to moisten the grazing ground with milk.
That is the best, what do you call, fertilizer.
The milk itself is
The one that-
overflowing,
the
and
cow is drop by drop going down on the land. That means you're going to have very good harvest.
yeah. And then there is another verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 4:18-8 where King Pruthu is glorified for his ability to bring harmony into nature through his leadership. When the earth,
Harmony into nature.
yes,
A person is incapable of doing that, but they have to be a pure good.
when the earth saw that King Pruthu was spiritually advanced and prepared to chastise her, she began to yield all the necessities for the maintenance of living entities. So the earth itself was
Influence.
influenced by the advanced spiritual state of King Prithu.
So you can expect that in a place where people are engaging in a lot of sense gratification, like Los Angeles, the weather is not going to be good there. There's going to be fires, there's going to be earthquakes, and all kinds of things happen in places like that, where there's excessive sense gratification taking place. And, eating meats and killing animals, the slaughterhouses and so forth, drinking liquor, engaging in illicit sex, places like that, there's always going to be turbulence, there's always going to be problems. Yeah. So we can tell if a place is a good place to live or a bad place to live. If it's a place where there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of sense gratification, there's a lot of bad weather, stay away from that place. Yes.
But like Mars, there's also like flooding in Mayapur.
Okay. That means that people in those places are not following all the regulative principles. Anyway, there's not just devotees in Mayapur, there are also Muslims there, there are also dacoits there, there are all kinds of people in Mayapur. They're not all devotees there. But even though there might be, let's say, floods in Mayapur, which there are, or there might be other types of inclement weather, or a lot of bugs, or a lot of snakes, or whatever, devotees are not usually, let's say, influenced by that. And because of their regulated principles, they survive those kinds of bad weather or bad conditions. Just like a tornado. Tornado, it's like gigantic. It's a gigantic thing, and people, are horrified by tornadoes. Very dangerous. Right? But it comes in a particular trajectory, and then it goes away. And oftentimes, people who are very pious, they're not touched by the tornado, but the people who are very sinful, they are devastated by the tornado. Tornadoes are actually living beings, and they also give them name like Irene or so forth. Tornado Irene, and there's a meaning to that. It means that it's actually a living entity. And if you're following Krishna consciousness, most of the time you'll be spared the havoc of a tornado or other types of inclement weather. And other people are devastated or even die because of that type of weather. Why is it that the devotees are not touched by it and non-devotees are? Well, because devotees are following principles of Krishna consciousness. Now, not so long ago, this year, the devotees in their community, I forget where they were. Anyway, they got influenced by very bad weather. Their houses burned down because there was severe fires. So does that mean they are living a life of sin? We don't know for sure, but it is a bad omen when the devotees are, subjected to very bad weather. So the way to pacify nature is by always chanting Hare Krishna and following the regulative principles. Not just one person, but all the community. So even if people are destined to die in that area, the devotees will somehow or other be spared. So there's a real benefit in being a devotee because you can pacify nature by practicing Krishna consciousness. Nobody else can do that, but devotees can. If, as a community, they are all following the regulative principles and chanting Hare Krishna. It is possible to pacify nature. In other words, make nature controlled. In other words, to be always nice and not have these terrible consequences of tornadoes, of earthquakes, and things like that. Those type of things usually happen in places where a large number of people are engaged in sinful activities. Okay. Any questions? I think we're over time. Yes. So, if you live in a place like Los Angeles, there's a lot of sense gratification going on. You can expect that there are going to be consequences manifested by bad weather and thieves and other, horrible things happening. So it's best to stay away from that. But on the other hand, even if you are living in a place like that, like our temple, we have a temple in Los Angeles. Usually, the temple is not, let's say, subjected to, being burned down or, being, destroyed by a tornado or something like that. By the way, we should ask the devotees in Los Angeles if their temple was, injured by the bad weather there. I don't think so. I didn't hear anything like that. So, therefore, being a devotee and actually practicing Krishna consciousness seriously is your best insurance policy. So we should all be very careful about how we organize our life. We should organize our life to be Krishna conscious 24 hours in the day. That way, we don't have to worry about anything. Krishna will always protect us.
Even in LA, they don't have
So
insurance
many
policies.
people.
Yes.
The all insurance companies have withdrawn. They don't give insurance to people.
And then the best insurance policy you can have is to be Krishna conscious.
Only guaranteed insurance policy. Only guaranteed.
Yes.
Because all those, they said they have insurance, but then now they're all backing off.
Yeah, because they're losing money. They're not
Yes.
making money by giving insurance policies to people. Yeah, you see, there's no guarantee in material life. And even insurance companies don't take away the possibility of having insurance because there's too much bad weather. And too many people, who have insurance policies, they have to pay them. So they're not crazy. They know. I mean, why? Because their purpose is to make money. It's not to, help people. Usually, if you're a driver and you never have an accident, right? Well, they reward you a little bit by giving you less money, by paying less money for your insurance. But if you're always having problems, they'll take away, they'll stop your insurance policy because you're having too many accidents. That happened to me. When I first got my car, I got into a bunch of accidents. They took my insurance policy away. They came to my house and took away the policy. And then for 3 years, I couldn't drive a car. Then after 3 years, when I was able to drive a car, I started driving very carefully. I learned my lesson.
So Maharaj,
Yeah.
in this article, there may be another, but ISKCON temple is intact actually, and the devotees. But there are saying that
Where is this?
many religious in LA, Los Angeles, New Dwarka, ISKCON New Dwarka. Many religious buildings have been lost, including the synagogue, a mosque, a Catholic parish, and many Protestant communities.
Protestant, not
Protestant.
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 Did that actually happen in LA?
Yeah.
Yeah. I rest my case. Well, there's a big advantage by being Krishna conscious. Now we know for sure. We have the evidence. Okay, any questions, comments? Any questions?
Something happened on that day.
On the top
So-
of that, the ISKCON people are feeding these
Basic
firefighters and all those people affected.
Yeah.
The Prasadam.
Yeah.
They are doing
And they appreciate it. The firefighters appreciate it.
Mhm.
Well, okay, our takeaway. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the parent, because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population to maintain the peace and prosperity of the society, country, and human race. Let me read that again. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the parents, because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population to maintain the peace and prosperity of the society, country, and human race. So, parents should not have children unless they're willing to take very good care of the children and to teach them, the children, Krishna consciousness right from birth. That is, the mother only eats prasadam. Therefore, when the baby is being growing in the womb, the baby is only eating prasadam, or getting the benefit of the mother's food. And the mother is always praying and not engaging in any sinful activities. Then you can expect that Krishna will put a saintly person in the womb of that mother. So there is a science of how to have good children. And it says here, since the child depends completely on the assimilated food of the mother, during pregnancy, there are restrictions on the food taken by the mother. Too much salt, chili, onion, and similar food is forbidden for the pregnant mother because the child's body is too delicate and new for him to tolerate such pungent food. Restrictions and precautions to be taken by the pregnant mother, as enunciated in the Smriti scriptures of Vedic literature, are very useful. We can understand from the Vedic literature how much care is taken to beget a nice child in society. The Garbhodana ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for persons in the higher grades of society, and it is very scientific. So today, we might not have, a pundit who can perform the Garbhodana, puja, but before trying to have a child, it is recommended that you chant, husband and wife together should chant 64 rounds. That replaces the Bhagavatam. So if mother and father actually do that before trying to have a child, that means that they purify, hopefully, they purify their consciousness. Because based on the consciousness of the father and mother at the moment of conception will determine the type of child Krishna will put into the womb of the mother. So, if the father and mother are both in the mode of ignorance or passion, then they get a child that is mostly governed by ignorance or passion. But if the mother and father are in the mode of goodness, following the principles of Krishna consciousness, and chanting 64 rounds before they try to have the child, hoping that their consciousness is purified, then they'll have a good child. So there's a science of how to have children. Of course, nowadays, people don't follow anything. And because of that, the children that is a headache, they grow up and be like a little demon in the house, always crying, always breaking things, always being a nuisance. But there are children that are born, they're very calm, they don't scream, and they don't always cry, and they show the principles of goodness, even when they're just a little baby. Right? But if you have a baby that's always crying and always, let's say, uncomfortable, you can understand that it's your own fault because you did not follow the principles of Krishna consciousness to have a baby. And then when a child gets older, they cause even more havoc in the family. So the Sarvadhan ceremony before sexual intercourse was compulsory for parents in the higher grades of society, and is very scientific. Other processes recommended in the Vedic literature during pregnancy are also very important. To take care of the child is the primary duty of the parents, because if such care is taken, society will be filled with good population to maintain the peace and prosperity of the society, country, and human race. So there's a science how to have a child. If you follow that science as is explained in the Shastra, then you'll be blessed with good children. And it'll free you from a lot of unnecessary, problems raising the child. You get a child in the mode of goodness, and therefore life will be very peaceful in your house. But if the child is in the mode of ignorance or passion, you're going to have a lot of trouble raising the child. Okay, so thank you very much. All glory
To Srila Prabhupada ki jai.